Thanksgiving was supposed to be family, right? But mine handed me debt papers like a gift. Dad slammed them down, called me a disgrace. My sister smirked while I packed, and I stood there, wondering how I became the enemy. But what they didn't know was that Grandma left everything to me. Why would she do that? And why did they lie for so many years? The house still smelled the same, turkey roasting, cinnamon lingering in the corners, floor polish mixing with something less tangible, disappointment. I hadn't set foot in my childhood home in over a year, but stepping through that door on Thanksgiving Day, it felt like time had folded in on itself. Same china plates, same creaky floorboard near the kitchen, same silence when I walked in. I had told myself this year would be different, that after months of strained calls and texts left on read, maybe, just maybe, there'd be a thaw. I wore the earrings Mom gave me 3 Christmases ago. I brought pecan pie. I smiled too much. They barely looked up when I arrived. Dad muttered something about me being on time for once, even though I was early. My siblings, Luke and Marissa, gave obligatory side hugs, eyes darting past me toward the game playing in the den. And I stood there, clutching the pie like a peace offering from someone who had nothing left to bargain with. Dinner was set at 4 p.m. sharp. The table was too long for the warmth it was meant to hold. We passed the potatoes. We passed judgment. Small talk danced around topics like a landmine field. "So, Anita," Marissa said, slicing into the turkey like it owed her money. "Still doing that thing with books or whatever?" "I work in publishing," I replied, forcing a laugh. "Same place, actually. Just got promoted." "Oh, wow," she smirked. "Dad, did you hear that? Promotion. Guess all that schooling finally paid off." Dad didn't respond, just sipped his wine. Luke chimed in. "We thought you moved to the city for good. Surprised you remembered where this house was." I ignored it, refilled Mom's water glass, tried to steer the conversation toward safe ground. Nieces, nephews, holiday plans. It didn't work. Dad kept quiet, but his silence was like fog. It soaked into everything, muffled any chance of connection. I could feel it building. And then it happened. He stood suddenly. Everyone paused mid-bite. He walked to the hutch drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and slapped it down in the middle of the table. The room went still. "That," he said, voice flat, "is the debt she stuck this family with." My stomach dropped. "What?" I blinked, glancing at the envelope. "You know exactly what I mean," he growled. "That joint loan you signed with me in 2016. You disappeared. Guess who's still paying for it?" What loan?" My voice cracked, then steadied. "I never signed anything." "Don't lie to me in my own house," he barked. "I should have known better than to think you'd come clean." Luke leaned in. "So that's why you vanished, huh? Took the money and ran?" Marissa shook her head. "Wow, Anita, seriously?" I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood. "I don't know what this is, but I didn't—" "You're a disgrace!" Dad shouted. "You're not my daughter, not anymore." I froze. The room blurred. Someone, I think it was Luke, lifted his phone and started filming. Just in case, I guess. It made me feel smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. Mom didn't say a word, didn't even meet my eyes. I looked around the table, every face twisted in judgment, resentment, or worse, indifference. "Leave," Dad said. "Now." I didn't grab my coat. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked to the door, holding my breath so I wouldn't sob in front of them. The cold air outside bit at my skin. I didn't flinch. I just kept walking. I sat in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The porch light behind me clicked on, someone checking to see if I was gone yet. I wasn't crying. I wasn't anything. Just empty. Then a memory hit me. I was 16, scrubbing the kitchen while the rest of them watched football, my mother telling me not to make a fuss because Dad had a headache. Even then, I knew I didn't belong. My phone buzzed, a voicemail. From a number I didn't recognize, I hit play. Hello, Ms. Anita. This is Charles Levinson, attorney for the estate of your grandmother, Eleanor. I'm calling to confirm we've finalized the revisions to the will. Please contact my office first thing Monday. My heart slowed. My breathing didn't. That name, that tone, that timing. I stared at the driveway. Maybe I wasn't the disgrace. Maybe I was the heir. The next morning, I woke up on a futon in Naomi's guest room. The mattress sagged in the middle, and my back reminded me of that with every stretch. My shoes sat near the door like they didn't belong anywhere. I barely slept. I'd gone to bed with my clothes still on, the voicemail playing over and over in my head. Grandma's voice wasn't on it, just the lawyer's, polite, deliberate. Final revisions to the will. I stared at the cracked ceiling, still half convinced it was a mistake. I hadn't spoken to Grandma much in her final year. My siblings made sure of that. They said she was too tired for visitors. They said she forgot things, and I believed them, until now. Why would she leave something behind for me? I could have ignored it, let it be another mystery swallowed by the family silence. But I was done playing that role. I pulled on a gray sweater, jeans, flats, nothing fancy. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to understand. The drive to Newark was quiet. No music, just my thoughts clattering around like loose change in a dryer. The law office sat tucked between a pawn shop and a tax service center, its paint faded, but its name, Gellerman Brody, etched clean into the glass. It smelled like paper and time. An older woman at the front desk looked up, blinked twice, then smiled softly. "You're Eleanor's granddaughter," she said. "You have her eyes." I nodded, unsure what to say. She buzzed me in. Mr. Gellerman stood as I entered his office, trim gray beard, tortoiseshell glasses, and a posture like he hadn't rushed for anything in years. "Ms. Anita," he said, voice calm. "You didn't waste any time." "I didn't have much to lose by coming," I replied. He motioned to the seat across from his, then pulled a small envelope from a drawer. No stamps, no firm letterhead, just my name, handwritten in Grandma's looping script. "I was instructed to give you this after Thanksgiving," he explained. "Only you." I held the envelope in my lap, tracing the ink. My hands felt colder than they should have. "You can read it here, or take your time elsewhere," he said gently. I opened it. Inside, a note on thick cream paper. 5 sentences, no more. "You always saw what the others pretended wasn't there. You asked questions no one wanted to answer. This is for your eyes only. The key will guide you. Be careful who you trust." Taped to the bottom, a small brass key, old and heavy. I looked up. "She left something?" Gellerman nodded. "A storage unit. But this note, wasn't part of the will. It was personal. I'm not at liberty to disclose much, but your grandmother, she was clear about you getting this before anything else." I wanted to ask why. Why now? Why only me? But I knew he couldn't say. Instead, I remembered little things. Grandma slipping me a book while my parents argued in the next room. Her quiet look during holidays when I stayed late to clean. Her way of whispering truths in kitchens while others told lies in living rooms. I asked, "Do Luke or Marissa know anything about this?" He shook his head. "Only you." Outside, I paused on the sidewalk. The key sat heavy in my coat pocket. I clutched it like it might dissolve if I let go. I hadn't just been pushed out of that house. I'd been erased. But maybe she left me the ink to rewrite it all. I texted Emery, my younger cousin, the only one who ever told the truth when the family lied. Hey, random question. You know anything about old family storage units? A minute passed. Then two. His reply came. If it's Unit B17, don't go alone. That froze me. Why would a storage unit need a warning? I pulled up old bills in my inbox, family group chats, scraps of conversations over the years, mentions of property, missing antiques, money Grandma had, but no one could track. Pieces of a story began to shape themselves. I didn't respond to Emery. Didn't tell Naomi where I was going. I got a rental car and drove to the address scratched on the envelope. The rain started halfway there, spitting against the windshield like static. The facility was quiet, nestled behind a chain-link fence and an auto body shop. A man at the desk glanced up as I walked in. I slid the key across the counter. He looked at it, then at me. That one, he muttered, hasn't been opened in almost 9 years. He walked me to the unit himself. Long corridor, concrete walls dripping with condensation. Unit B17 sat at the far end, rusted door, dented corners, a lock that looked older than I was. I reached for the key. Just then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. The voice on the other end was low, tense. If you open that door, you'll destroy everything they've tried to bury. I let the phone call go unanswered. My thumb hovered for a second, then hit end. Whoever that voice was, they didn't scare me enough to stop. I was already soaked from the rain, already knee-deep in the mess my family left behind. I wasn't walking away now. The lock clicked, stiff from time and neglect. The door groaned as it lifted, sending a puff of stale, thick air into my face. It smelled like forgotten winters and moldy cardboard. The bare bulb overhead buzzed weakly, casting a pale flicker that barely touched the back of the unit. I stepped inside. Stacks of boxes towered over old suitcases and plastic bins. Some labels had faded completely, others barely readable. I moved slowly, brushing away dust, pausing only when I saw the one box that stopped me cold. Written in blue crayon, in handwriting I recognized as my own, Nini's stuff. That was what Grandma called me when I was little, Nin. No one had used that name since I was 10. I knelt and peeled back the lid. On top, a photo of me on my 6th birthday, frosting on my cheek. Beneath it, letters I'd written but never sent. Dear Grandma, one began. Dad says I can't come over anymore, but I didn't do anything wrong. Under the letters, a baby blanket, my baby blanket. Yellow, worn at the edges. I pressed it to my face and tried not to break down right there on the cold concrete floor. She hadn't forgotten me. She'd saved pieces of my life when everyone else tried to erase me. Behind that box, under an old coat, I found a locked file case. The small key from Grandma's note fit perfectly. It opened with a dull snap. Inside, chaos. Paperwork stuffed in no order. Medical bills, bank statements, loan documents. I pulled out a folder marked Joint Credit and felt my stomach turn. There, clear as daylight, were my name and signature on a loan application dated 5 years ago. But I hadn't signed it. The writing was close, but not mine. A forged signature. Another folder showed multiple hospital bills under my mother's name, but billed to a joint account that linked back to me. Pages and pages of debt. Then, tucked behind them, legal correspondence addressed to my brother, quiet settlements, threats of wage garnishment, hidden liens on Grandma's old property. They didn't just throw me under the bus, they drove it straight over me and kept going. Every time they called me the problem, every argument about money, every whisper behind closed doors, they'd been hiding this. Blaming me was easier than owning what they did. I kept digging. At the very bottom, beneath a legal pad and a plastic sleeve, I found something wrapped in plastic. It was a photo album. I pulled it out, my hands already trembling again. Inside, photos from holidays I wasn't invited to. They'd told me I was too sick, too emotional, not stable. But here they were, my siblings, my father, even my mother, laughing, toasting wine, opening gifts. And in one photo, they were all seated around a dining table with a thick packet of papers in front of them. The same loan application, my name circled in red ink. They didn't even bother to hide it. Stuffed into the back cover, an envelope with shaking handwriting. If anything happens to me, give this to Anita. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just holding it made my heart race. She knew. She saw it coming. And she knew no one else would tell me the truth. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos of every critical page, especially the ones with signatures and account numbers. I emailed them to my attorney with a note. For my records, please confirm receipt. Then I hit record on a voice memo. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. I wrote down every name, every date I could see. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but I was done staying quiet. I stepped out of the unit, locking it behind me. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for the sedan across the way. Engine running. The figure inside didn't move until I did. Our eyes met through the windshield. Emery. He stared, expression unreadable. Then he hit the gas and peeled out before I could move. Back at Naomi's, I didn't say much, just nodded when she asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I was clear. I spread the documents across the guest bed, sorting what mattered most. I printed copies, tucked them into a red folder, and labeled it with a black Sharpie. Anita's Truth. At 9:58 p.m., I called Gellerman's office and left a message. I'd like to formally request a meeting regarding my grandmother's will. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I didn't tell anyone else. I slept with the folder beside me. The next morning, I wore black, not to mourn the past, but to prepare for war. By the time I got back to New Jersey, the sun had dropped behind the tree lines and the wind had sharpened. Cold bit through my coat, but it matched what I felt inside, cold, focused, and unshakable. I clutched the red folder close, pages pressing against my ribs like a second spine. The house looked the same, but it felt different now, tighter, as if the walls had caught wind of the truth and were bracing for impact. Inside, the living room buzzed with low conversations and the clink of wine glasses. My siblings glanced up. No warm hugs. No glad you're back. Just a nod from Dad. Marjorie's eyes swept over me like I was a stain on her good carpet. Holiday get-togethers should be warm, she said loud enough for others to hear, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Not heavy. The dig landed, but I smiled. Thin, controlled. Dinner was served with stiff chatter. Spoons scraped ceramic. The turkey was dry, but everyone chewed like it was sacred. Marjorie raised her glass. To hard work, to family loyalty, and to those who carry the weight without complaint. She didn't look at me, but she didn't need to. I stood, quietly, raised my glass too. I've carried weight you don't even have words for, I said. Years of silence, blame, your praise tonight, built on my back. Gideon froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. The room went still. Marjorie blinked, then scoffed like I was being dramatic. Anita, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Dad's voice cut through. Enough. But I kept going. You gave speeches while I was patching holes. You played perfect while signing my name onto debt I never agreed to. You smiled while telling people I was unstable. Her face paled. After dinner, I didn't ask permission. I spread the documents across the living room table like a dealer laying out cards. Florence hovered near the doorway, unsure if she should stay. Read, I told them. My voice didn't shake. Marjorie stepped forward reluctantly. Loan documents, forged signatures, property deeds listing me as co-owner, used to secure financing for her business, the same business she told everyone she built from scratch. "I never saw these," she whispered. "You cashed checks in my name." Gideon's eyes darted between the pages and the floor. I held up a photo from the storage unit. Marjorie at a table, signing something, my name circled on the paper in red ink. "You told the world you did this alone. You didn't." Phones were out. Someone was recording. I didn't stop them. "This ends tonight," I said. "No more pretending." I left the table. No one followed. Back in my old bedroom, everything felt smaller, the ceiling lower, the walls tighter. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out the baby blanket again. It still smelled like cedar and thyme. "You always saw what they pretended wasn't there," Grandma had written. But even with all the proof, doubt crept in. Would anyone really believe me? They've told their version so many times. I became a ghost they could decorate with whatever lie they needed that day. I stared at the ceiling. That quote from Maya Angelou came back again, like it always did when I wanted to disappear. "There is no greater agony than carrying an untold story inside you." I wasn't carrying it anymore. I packed up the documents carefully, slid them back into the red folder, zipped my coat. I was halfway down the stairs when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. The voice was low, muffled, like a recording distorted on purpose. "Stop now, or the legacy will bury more than just your name." Click. I stared at the screen. No number, no ID. I stood still, just long enough to feel the fear trying to crawl up my throat. Then I exhaled, picked up the folder again, tightened my grip. I hung up and thought, I won't be scared. Not tonight. I walked into the law office at exactly 10 a.m., not a minute late, not like the old days, waiting, doubting, shrinking. I wore black head to toe, not mourning, armor, the kind you wear when you stop asking for decency and start demanding truth. The conference room was cold, not by temperature, but by temperature of the people in it. Every chair was filled, except one, mine. No one looked up. Gideon tapped his pen. Marjorie adjusted her scarf. Florence sat perfectly still, eyes on her lap. I pulled out a chair, scraped it back loud enough to make them flinch, and sat down. Mr. Gellerman came in shortly after. Calm, neutral. He set a stack of folders on the table and said, "This meeting is being documented, legally, verbally, on record." I placed my red folder beside his stack, the one marked Anita's truth. They noticed that Marjorie was the first to speak. Of course. "Before we get into the mess of legalese," she said with a soft smile that never reached her eyes, "maybe we can resolve this within the family, privately. No need to involve strangers." Gideon chimed in, like a middle manager trying to keep a lid on HR complaints. "We're family, Anita. We don't need outsiders meddling." I looked him dead in the eye. Family didn't hesitate to meddle with my credit, my name, my life. Florence tried her usual peacekeeper tone. "Don't let this divide us. We've been through so much. Let's not let documents pull us apart." I leaned forward. "This already did. You just hoped I'd never talk." Gellerman cleared his throat. "I must remind all parties, attempts to coerce or pre-negotiate terms before the reading are not only discouraged, they're illegal." Their silence was telling. I reached into my folder, pulled out the USB drive. "This isn't just about numbers. You want quiet. You're not gonna like what I'm about to play." I plugged it into the laptop, clicked play. The recording came on, old, grainy, but her voice was clear. "Grandma, I know what they did to her," she said. "I saw the papers. I should have said something sooner, but I thought I could fix it quietly. I thought Gideon would stop." But he didn't. If I go before she finds out, I've failed her. Gideon stood up so fast his chair crashed. That's fake. You edited that. She never said my name. I clicked pause, brought up the timestamp, metadata, date of the voicemail. I had it verified. Twice. Marjorie left the room. She couldn't even look at me. Florence cried quietly. They thought that was the end. They thought shame would stop me. It didn't. After the chaos settled, Gideon straightened his jacket, face hard again. We need to vote, he said. Family only. On what? Gellerman asked. A settlement. A payout. We offer her enough to keep this out of court, out of the press, out of the will. Marjorie came back in just in time to second it. Her eyes red, her mouth tight. Florence said yes after a long pause. Only for peace. They all looked at me like they were doing me a favor, like I should be grateful. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I watched each one raise a hand like they were picking a lunch order. Cowards in pressed shirts. When they were done, I stood. I didn't ask for a vote. I came with the truth. Gellerman didn't even blink. He just opened the envelope beside him and began reading. The will of Mabel Leonsky, as filed and witnessed, declares the establishment of a private trust and names Anita Leonsky as the sole beneficiary. For a second, the room was dead silent. Then Florence fainted. Gideon slammed the table. Marjorie's voice cracked. This isn't real. She forged that. She must have... But I already knew what was real. Every word. And they were only just beginning to understand what that meant. I stepped back into the meeting room late that afternoon, Florence a few steps behind me. I could still feel the heat from the moment the will was read, like smoke that hadn't cleared. The air had shifted. No one spoke. Then Florence moved to the center like she'd been holding something in too long. I can't keep this inside anymore, she said, pulling a flash drive from her bag. She walked over, plugged it in. The projector screen lit up. Scan after scan appeared. Deeds, contracts, signatures. Sylvia's name was printed clearly, consistently, tied to properties we all thought were in someone else's hands. My name was there too, buried deep as co-signer, never informed. Gideon stood up fast. This is ridiculous. You're taking her side now? Marjorie rolled her eyes, turned to me with venom in her voice. You dragged all this here just to shame us? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Florence clicked to the final scan, one I hadn't seen. A contract from 1998 with Sylvia and Gideon's names forged on my behalf. Property value, 7 figures, hidden in a shell company, dated a year after my mother died. Silence, then chairs shifting. No one made eye contact. I looked at them all. This isn't revenge. This is the air clearing after years of rot. Florence wasn't finished. She opened her phone and tapped play. Grandma's voice, soft and shaking, came through the speakers. I never wanted this to fall on her shoulders, but they lied, and they lied again. And I did nothing. She saw the shadows when everyone else kept pretending there was light. You could have heard a pin drop. No one said a word, not even Florence, not even me. Marjorie's face drained of color. Gideon looked down at the table like it held an exit door. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in that room. I felt seen. Back at the house, as dusk gave way to evening, Florence and I went upstairs. Just the two of us. We hadn't spoken since we left the firm, but when I opened the attic door, she followed me inside without asking. It still smelled like cedar and dust, my old childhood boxes stacked neatly against the wall. I sat cross-legged on the old rug, opening one marked Letters. Inside were yellowed pages, folded diaries, postcards, Grandma's handwriting everywhere. One entry stuck with me. I pray Anita never lets this house take her voice. Love liberates, it doesn't bind. But sometimes family binds you without ropes. I sat with that a while, let it work through my bones. Then I whispered to the air, to no one, maybe to her. I'm not angry anymore. I'm awake. I wanted justice, but not to destroy anyone. I wanted peace, but not at the price of silence. I could imagine telling my father I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry his sins around in my chest anymore. It was dark when I went downstairs again. Florence had fallen asleep on the couch. I poured myself water, sat at the kitchen table, then called Mr. Gellerman. I want a formal statement, public. This doesn't stay in that room. He didn't ask why. Before heading to bed, I left a voicemail for my father. Tomorrow, you'll see your legacy uncovered. Not by rage, but by fact. Later, under the glow of my desk lamp, my phone lit up. A news alert, anonymous tip, local paper, preliminary documents, leaked, fraud, real estate laundering, financial misconduct, ongoing investigation. The article didn't name him, but it was just the beginning. I leaned back in my chair. The storm had already started, whether he wanted it or not. I stood in the living room with the door wide open behind me, inhaling the clash of voices and heavy air. Lights were overhead, but dim, sockets humming with more tension than wattage. With my red folder in hand, I watched them gather. Dad, Marjorie, Gideon, cousins, aunt, uncle, all assembled, faces set. I felt the pulse in my neck, that tight drumbeat before you stop running and start fighting. I'd brought everything, the documents, recordings, photos, all proof. I want a full family meeting now, I said. Everybody here. You all know why. Marjorie's lips tightened. Gideon raised a protest, but I spoke before he could finish. I quoted Grandma. A truth untold only serves those who lie. The tension snapped in that moment. Dad's face flushing, eyes narrowing. They couldn't look away. Marjorie erupted. She accused me of forging evidence, of wanting attention. She stormed across the room, tossed a photo album against the wall. Glass shattered, pictures scattered. Hearts thudded. I didn't flinch. I named every lie she told, every omission she used to build her story. I pointed to signatures, bank statements, those holiday photos she claimed I was too weak for. The room tilted around me, eyes flicking. Guests swallowed. Gideon's jaw clenched. Then I led them upstairs to the attic. Grandma's old writing desk, dusty boxes, pine floor that creaked under my steps. I unlocked the chest she kept hidden and pulled out a yellowed envelope addressed, "My dearest Anita." My hands trembled. I unfolded her letter in that sacred space. She wrote of sorrow, forging debts she knew about, promises she couldn't keep, wishing she'd defended me sooner. She asked me to be loud with truth, even if I was shouted down. Silence followed. I handed out copies of the folder Anita's Truth to every person there, and to a reporter I'd invited. Someone tried to offer hush money, a deal. They said, this could all go away quietly. I looked at their faces, eyes shifting. I want justice, not a cover-up. My voice was calm, my resolve solid. Marjorie's eyes flickered with tears. Gideon's posture sagged. Dad looked cornered. The authority he'd held was cracking, like old plaster. Late that night, I found myself alone in the ruins of a broken picture frame Marjorie smashed. The frame lay on the floor, shards around my feet. I knelt, gathering pieces, slipping one broken shard into my pocket, something to remember this moment by. Then there was a knock at the door. My Uncle Leon stood there, hands shaking, holding a document. It was signed by Dad. A confession. Not a legal confession, perhaps, but enough. You deserve this, he said. I didn't cry. I nodded. I couldn't speak. He offered me something I'd been waiting for through all this: recognition, truth that others feared. In that torn paper, in Leon's tears, I realized nothing could ever be silent again. The hall doors opened. I walked in first, alone, steady. The room was large, oak tables shining under dim lights, ancestral portraits watching over us. Extended family, neighbors, even reporters, all gathered. I stood at the podium in black, same black I wore when I demanded truth months ago. Silence followed as I cleared my throat. Truth doesn't require decoration, I said. It just needs to be heard. I opened the envelope marked Mom's Last Words. The paper inside trembled in my grip. She admitted regrets. She wrote of letting brothers lie, letting debts be ignored, siding with Daryl to protect her image. She wrote, "You deserved more, and soon you will understand why I stayed silent then." Heads bowed. Marjorie's eyes filled. Gideon's jaw worked, tight. I paused, let the weight settle. Each word hung in the air like smoke before a fire. Then I turned toward the reporters at the back. I revealed documents sent to the local paper, showing financial misreporting, forged debts, wrong signatures. Daryl stood flustered, stuttered, caught, phones flashing, whispered, "Oh my God!" "Dad, explain this." I didn't let him speak first. "You had your speech. Now here's the evidence." I quoted a judge I once admired. "Integrity is more important than image." The room cracked. Gideon looked away. Marjorie's face went pale. Some relatives walked out early, heads bowed. Others whispered betrayal. Victory felt bitter. I stepped off the stage with a pounding heart. The applause was thin. Some claps were hollow. A pastor friend leaned in, said quietly, "You've done what many are afraid to do." I nodded, trying not to show tears. Pride mixed with loss. Family repairs weren't happening tonight. But truth had broken the silence. Later, alone, I stood outside in Savannah's cold night rain. Reporters' lights flickered through the glass. Daryl was surrounded inside, cornered. Gideon and Marjorie looked smaller under the chandelier. I turned and heard tires on wet pavement. A car pulled away slowly. Window rolled down. I caught Daryl's voice. "You don't know what you've started." I nodded. This was just the beginning. The law office was quiet, almost too quiet. Mr. Daniels' walls were lined with legal books, some probably older than me. Black and white photos of long-gone men in bow ties stared from behind dusty glass. He motioned for me to sit, then handed me a thick envelope. "Your grandmother left this," he said. "Said it wasn't to be opened until everything was done." I nodded, cracked the seal with a finger that didn't quite feel steady. Inside, a letter written in her spidery cursive, and another sheet folded neatly. The letter started with her voice. I could hear it, tired but clear. She wrote of things hidden, choices she wished she could undo. But she also wrote this: "Anita, I named you trustee, the whole trust. You're not just an heir, you're the keeper now, because you'll protect it, even from them." I stared at the document, read the official words twice. I had control now, not revenge, not spite, but the legal power to make sure this cycle didn't repeat. I left the office and drove straight home. The Savannah house sat heavy under the late afternoon sky. Inside, I walked to the hallway where the floor creaked under one board more than others. The letter had said to look there. I pulled it loose. The safe was small, hidden like guilt. Inside were faded photos, old receipts, and another envelope. This one was from Grandfather. He'd written of years watching Daryl siphon money, manipulate their mother with half-truths and whole lies. The documents backed it up. I sat there, surrounded by proof, hands shaking, not from rage, but from clarity. Protect what's yours and theirs too, even if they never thank you for it. That's what he wrote. I cried, not from sadness, but because I finally saw the full picture. The betrayals weren't new. They were just passed down. I wasn't weak. I had survived what made others cruel. The next morning, I got a call I didn't expect. A woman's voice, soft, older. Anita. Your community college fund? It's reinstated. I didn't understand. She explained, an old friend of Mom's, someone Grandma had helped in the 70s. She'd watched everything unfold. Your family may not value you, she said, but some of us always did. There was more, a grant, in my name. For women like me, returning to school later in life, it hit me. I'd become the one holding the light forward. And not just for me. A week later, I hosted my first dinner. Not fancy, no china, just mismatched plates, warm casseroles, and sweet tea. My pastor came, a few cousins who'd stood by. We laughed. We sat long after the food was gone. I raised a glass. We don't choose where we come from, I said, but we do choose what we pass on. That morning, Marjorie sent a card. No apology. Just, thank you for not becoming like us. Gideon texted a photo. Our childhood dog on an old swing set. No caption. Just that. It was enough. Later, as the sun dipped low, I stepped out onto the porch. The house behind me didn't feel heavy anymore. I whispered, "This house won't break another girl again." The sky turned gold, then orange. I lit a candle on the porch rail. Something about the quiet felt clean. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the gravel, familiar. I turned toward the sound, and knew, before I saw, that some stories never end.